We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Monday. It's March 16th, 2026. And today's going to be all about manipulation. Manipulation of the facts, manipulation of your emotions. And that's going to be in the form of the Trump administration trying to control the media narrative on Iran. Job numbers have been revised downward. Fake housing affordabilities are passing through both houses of Congress, the latter one coming from the Senate. We'll dig into that one. Gas prices are high, and the fixes don't seem to be that intelligent. Political leaders and talking heads are manipulating the facts to get you to their way of thinking. And also, a teacher assaults a student, but might go free. So let's get after it. I do not like lies and manipulation. I can't stand it. I don't have very many rules in the Friend household, but my boys know that I got two. One, don't lie. Two, don't disrespect your mom, because don't make a punk out of me, and do not disrespect the queen. Honesty comes first, though, in our house, and I don't see a lot of examples of it out there. And the folks in charge, I'm going to hurt some feelings today, but it's not your mama's show, it's your daddy's show. The folks in charge, who purport to come from the conservative side, are manipulating the American people. And we, if not nothing on this program, endeavor to always be honest, always tell the truth. And as a result, I think we're like a man without a country. But let you determine the outcome of what we get into today. So let's first start over with the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which is weighing in on the way the media is characterizing the United States kinetic operations. Don't you dare call it a war. After all, I'm a flight progress coordinator, not a stewardess, but the way it's being reported. So this first piece comes from CBS News. Headline reads, FCC chair threatens news networks' licenses amid Trump criticism of Iran war coverage. So the big mucky muck over at the Federal Communications Commission, the chairman, his name is Brendan Carr, and he has now threatened to revoke broadcast licenses. The FCC is supposed to be independent. It issues these 8-year licenses to individual broadcast stations. So like the local television station where you live, where you see those giant satellites outside of, they get licenses from the FCC. It's not CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox. Those are the giant channels. They don't get their licenses over from the FCC. It's the local affiliates. And now they're being threatened because of the way that news media is characterizing American actions overseas, dropping warheads on foreheads. The quote that the chairman gave, his name again, Brendan Carr, is broadcasters that are running hoaxes and news distortions, also known as the fake news, have chance now to correct course before their licenses and renewals go up. Now, this is sort of a continuation of what the president started hammering down on last year. And I think I have a quote from him, also comes from CBS News. Yes, sure do. So the headline of this piece, and again, it's a little bit dated, it comes from September of 2025. Trump says TV networks covering him negatively should maybe have their licenses revoked. And this was around the time of the Jimmy Kimmel hoopla and the Charlie Kirk assassination. And Jimmy Kimmel went on to say something, I don't know, the way he characterized the assassin of Charlie Kirk was a MAGA guy, and he got pulled off the air. I mean, there was all this drama around it, and we don't really care about Jimmy Kimmel. He's kind of a talentless hack. But this is the quote from the president last September. Donald Trump said, "They give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their licenses should be taken away." And that got me thinking of the historical context for something like this. The president of the United States, the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, threatening news outlets for First Amendment protected activity. That's what it is. You can call it yellow journalism. You can call it fake news, what have you. They are allowed to say what they want, basically. there's some very finite amount of limitations, and I even have problems with those because in the pesky dusty documents it says that the government shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech and of the press. So that's pretty determinative. Seems like it's all encompassing, but even now we're dealing with this phrase that gets thrown out there pretty erroneously. So I want to kind of do a little bit of a history lesson for those who may not know. And I'm talking about the phrase, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Do you know where that comes from, actually? Very few people do. Very few politicians do. It's emotional. It's a way to get people to your way of thinking, but it's completely out of context. It actually comes out of World War One. During World War One, there were a couple of socialists who were against the United States being involved in the war. It was actually a war. It wasn't a kinetic action. It wasn't a policing activity or whatever sort of term de jour they can come up with now. The United States had declared war. The socialists in America were saying, we don't like it. We don't want to be involved. They were a little bit more isolationist than the communists are today, particularly on Russia and Ukraine. And we will get to that later on the show. But they started to hand out pamphlets that were encouraging American men to not go and serve, do not go into the draft. And they said, this is a violation of our 13th Amendment. It's compulsory work. It's basically a slavery responsibility that's being thrust upon you. You shouldn't serve. And they got arrested. The socialists got arrested. They got charged for violating the Espionage Act of 1917, which is pretty Orwellian. It was passed during the war, so pretty conveniently. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And shockingly, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously to uphold the conviction of these two socialists for exercising their First Amendment rights. And the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Oliver Wendell Holmes, this is where he lists off this, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. So I actually have a rundown of it, and I will put the link to it in the show notes today so you can kind of like dig into it for yourself. But the quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes is as follows. The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. The fact that the nation was involved in war meant that, quote, many things that might be said in times of peace are such a hindrance to its effort that their utterance will not be endured so long as men fight, and that no court could regard them as a protection by any constitutional right. That's kind of fancy, isn't it? Man, we have fallen off. But actually, when I read that, and it'd been a long time since I'd read that quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes, it got me thinking of somebody else who is a little bit more prominent today. You see him out there talking about the kinetic action going on in Iran. Don't you dare call it a war. How dare you? I'm a flight progress coordinator, definitely not a stewardess. It got me thinking of one Senator Lindsey Graham, who said something very similar during another kinetic action, definitely not a war, because he had his positions on free speech and the exceptions in the eyes of the good senator.
I want to get to this Afghanistan thing. General Petraeus today condemned the actions of this Florida preacher who burned the Koran. You heard what Senator Reid said. Yeah. Is there anything that actually can be done along this line?
You know, I wish we could find some way to hold people accountable. Free speech is a great idea, but we're in a war. During World War II, you had limits on what you could say if it would inspire the enemy. So burning a Quran is a terrible thing, but it doesn't justify killing someone.
Free speech is a great thing, but we're in a war. That's exactly what the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was essentially saying, and actually pivoted away from, because actually later on in that year, the very same Supreme Court had a very similar case, and Oliver Wendell Holmes cited for free speech. So then they kind of had a conundrum. What are we going to do? And over the years, we've gotten to, you can't incite violence. That's basically the limitation on free speech at this point. But manipulation, of course. We're in a war. Do you hate America? No. I think the most American thing you can do is exercise the rights that are itemized in our pesky, dusty documents, particularly the first one. The Bill of Rights has a list of 10. Number 1 is free speech, free press. And this manipulation that's going on from a media standpoint from our government is wholly out of line with our Constitution. I don't care where you stand on the kinetic action going on in Iran. If you think it's a great thing, if you think it's a terrible thing, you're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to post it online. You're a member of the press right now, right? Same thing should go for news outlets out there. If you don't like what they're saying, just turn it off. It is no business of the government determining who and who cannot broadcast what they want about the goings on overseas. Now, another media manipulation that this current administration was, I don't know if they're behind it or not, but they definitely have their allies in some forms of media. So Donald Trump, president of the United States, his allies are all coming from Fox News. He's pulling them right out of there to serve in his cabinet, right? You got Pete Hegseth, you got the Judge Janine, now the United States Attorney for Washington, D.C. He's pulling them out of Fox News. They are very sympathetic at the Fox News channel to the current presidential administration. And then when it ping pongs back to the other side, then they'll oppose it. That's just the way things go. Now, we had some fatalities, some KIAs over in Iran. The bodies were delivered back to the United States, and the president was there for the dignified transfer ceremony. Now, who remembers during the Biden auto pen administration when he was there and he was looking down at his watch the whole time because he couldn't remember what time it was because his brain was made of mush? Not a good look. And everybody on the political right was incredibly incensed about it, and justifiably so. And Jen Psaki could try to massage it all she wanted in her memo, but she eventually had to edit that part out of her memo. Well, now we got a new president. Are you going to hold him to the same standard? Or because he's your guy, you're not really interested in it? And particularly if you like to consume the content that's on Fox News, you wouldn't really even know because they published or aired different footage of the dignified transfer. Why would they do that? So the piece that I have here is an update to this story that's been going on for about a week plus. It comes from KSAT.com. Headline reads, Fox News apologizes for showing old video of a hatless Donald Trump at a dignified transfer ceremony. And if you happen to be watching us here on Rumble and YouTube, or later on in the day over at Spotify, everything housed under AMRAD Pod, short for American Radicals Podcast, you'll see a photograph of the president saluting, wearing a ball cap on his head, white ball cap, gold letters, USA. And there was a little bit of outrage about that. People thought he kind of looked like a goofball. It wasn't a good look for him. So Fox News necessarily made the adjustments. They apparently initially aired this footage where you see the still shot here on this article from KSAT.com. And that was on a Saturday. And then the next day on Sunday, they aired old footage. Now, Fox News claims that it was done in error, but the timing of it seems quite coincidental, serendipitous, because they probably got feedback that, hey, that's a really bad look for our boy who's the president right now. So just tomorrow, when you air footage, pull the old stuff and hopefully nobody catches it. It is, after all, a weekend and nobody's really watching the news so closely on a Saturday. That's definitely what happened. No question. But they had to manipulate it. That's not honest. That is not the actual footage of the president at the dignified transfer ceremony. They should be honest. They should be straight with the American people. If they like it, they hate it, that's up to them. It's not up to the news media to try to manipulate your emotions, and certainly not to withhold the facts. And the facts are the president of the United States went to a ceremony with the ball cap on his head. How you feel about that is up to you. The job of the news media is to present the facts. And also, the job of our government statistically is to present some facts to us so that we can interpret the job that they're doing. So I want to go into this update that we recently saw from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Don't worry, we're not going to get that nerdy about it. But it's an update to the jobs figures that we got from 2025, the first full year of the Donald Trump Part 2 administration. And we were told one thing, and now that nobody's really paying attention or they have their eye on other things, we were told something different. So from NBC News, the following headline: U.S. had almost no job growth in 2025. I thought everything was awesome. Preliminary data indicated that the United States economy added 584,000 jobs last year, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics revised that number down to 181,000, which would mean that it was reduced by 400,000. The Bureau of Labor Statistics said they did this because they got more information. So they got more information that said they had less jobs. So they were overestimating how things went. They were just throwing numbers out there to manipulate the financial markets, because if jobs numbers look good, the stock market goes bangers, right? To manipulate people's confidence, to manipulate elections. We are in, after all, midterm year now. This is not a good look. You only added 180,000 jobs last year. It's the worst year since 2020, the final year of Donald Trump Part 1 administration, which was during the coronavirus, where they told everybody to stay home and stay safe and not go to work the job that was not essential, that they used to feed their family and pay their mortgage. And a lot of people lost jobs. And a lot of those jobs didn't come back because they were small businesses that were permanently shuttered while everybody continued to shop from Amazon and go to Walmart and big box stores. So we're now 5 years hence. Not a good look. 400,000 you're off by? I mean, 400,000 people live in Orlando or Tampa or New Orleans or Cleveland, Ohio. What if Cleveland, Ohio just disappeared? Do you think that might not be reported for a year? Exact same thing happened here. If everybody in Tampa Bay lost their job, would it be a significant news story? Yes. And yet they were able to stretch out the bad news just enough so that they can manipulate the perceptions of the American people. Because times are tough. The economy is not doing bangers. It's not as strong as it's being represented. We're not getting an honest accounting of everything we're seeing. And that's in the form of affordability. That's the word, I guess, the Republicans that they do not want to run on. They're saying that that's fake news. That's the Democrats. Don't say affordability. Why? It's completely relevant. The economy and cost of living. Those are chief concerns of every single person who goes to the polls. It's always the number one thing: economy, jobs, inflation, everything related to the amount of money that they bring home. Now, one of the biggest costs that people incur just because they're alive is housing. And we have a housing crisis. That's the way it's been characterized by both Democrats and Republicans. There's a shortage of houses. So because we have this pesky, dusty document that nobody seems to pay attention to, and they just kind of take on responsibilities that aren't in there and ignore responsibilities that are, nobody's actually addressing the problem. Instead of deporting 30, 40, 50 million illegal aliens that are hogging up all the houses, which would create more housing availability and bring down prices, instead, our United States Congress, both chambers, are attempting to pass on through and then reconcile a housing affordability bill. Now, this is a manipulation. Now, let me work our way through it, because it's being billed one way, and actually the facts and figures that are in it are quite detrimental and will be a net negative to housing if you actually take a moment and consider it. So the piece that I have is from CNBC. It says, housing affordability bill clears the Senate as investor ban creates headaches. Investor ban. This is the emotionality. This is where they try to get you to say, oh, yeah, this is a good thing. Because this bill includes a ban on investors and companies from buying single family homes if they already have 350 or more houses in their portfolio. That just means BlackRock can't buy the houses, and people on the right love it. Yeah, that's right. We don't want these giant corporations, these World Economic Forum devotees coming in, buying the houses because you will own nothing, you will rent forever. We got to stop that from happening. But in effect, what's going to happen when you ban that? Well, you're going to get rid of a lot of rentals. So that doesn't free up housing. And there's other elements of it as well, because there's some carve out, and they're saying, well, if you do some renovations, then you can have more than 350, but you have to sell it within 7 years. Well, people do rent to buy houses all the time, and their contracts are longer than 7 years. So those will now be off the market. But that's kind of complicated. That's kind of nerdy, Steve. Let's work through a couple of the other elements of this bill. And let's see if you actually took the time to read through the details, would you come away with a different conclusion other than we hate BlackRock? Thank you very much, John Thune, Republicans in the Senate, for passing this on through. Here are some things that are getting passed on through the affordability bill with the Senate right now as it currently stands. The bill wants to enable more and faster home building to increase the supply. Good. It's including streamlining environmental reviews and encouraging state and local governments to reform zoning rules and other regulations. Okay, good. We hate regulations, but part of that is going to be you can build more condominiums and duplexes and quadplexes and triplexes, giant skyscrapers in a suburban area. That's not really specified here, but I'm just telling you that's what's going to happen. They want to create programs to offer grants or loans for local governments to assist planning and implementation activities associated with affordable housing. So they want to take, that's government speak when they say affordable housing. They want to take money that they've stolen, I mean tax from you, or printed out of thin air that causes inflation, and give it to local jurisdictions. And when those local jurisdictions become addicted to getting that cash infusion, they do whatever the federal government wants. And in this case, they're going to be encouraged to build Section 8 housing. Wherever. We've already alleviated the zoning restrictions. We could have Section 8 right next door to you. How do you feel about that, AMRADs? Other elements of it, and I'll put it up here. I'm going to churn through them. They want to offer forgivable loans to homeowners and landlords who want to repair their homes. Do you have home repairs? You got to go to Home Depot? You can get a forgivable government loan. That means they just give you money as long as you spend it on what they approve of. It's forgiven, which means we're redistributing wealth from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Some nice socialism in our federal government. They're going to reauthorize more grants, so more money giveaway to fund repairs. They're going to require the Federal Housing Administration to increase limits on loans for multifamily mortgages. So people who can't afford to buy a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex, they're going to be allowed to borrow more money. Where do we have any sort of proof of concept of this working well? I know we have proof of concept of it working very poorly. Probably the last time that the economy tanked for an extended period of time, the 2008 financial crisis, because we were giving ninja loans, which is no income, no job, no assets. You get a house and you get a house. So we're going to give more money to people who can't afford to buy houses. When I say we, I mean you, taxpayer. They're going to steal, I mean tax your money in order to do it. And the last one, housing and urban development. There's a program aimed at maintaining long-term affordability at public housing units and codify protections for tenants under the program. Rent control for Section 8. See, if you actually read it and you can digest the government speak, does it sound like something awesome? But they manipulate you when they put out the giant announcement. Thank you very much, John Thu, for pushing back on BlackRock. No. What's going to wind up happening is communal housing. We're going to build all these apartments and condos, the ugliness, because we're going to ease up the zoning restrictions to free up the housing. None of that is in the charge of the American people have of our federal government that is memorialized in our Constitution. It's not there. Do your job. Stop doing things that aren't in there, and then maybe the housing prices will come down. And certainly there will be more opportunities for people to get into houses if we were to eliminate and eject 50 million illegal aliens from the country. And that is one of your jobs. Do your jobs. Now, what's something that's definitely, I don't like to speak in absolutes. I want to talk about fuel. That's gone up quite a bit, right? I mean, it's gone up like 25, 30% in the last week and a half. Gasoline. I think the average was, what was it? I looked it up. $3.58. And that was data. That was a couple of days ago. I don't know where it stands right now. But there's this misconception, I think, from the American people that the president, just by virtue of his job, can make the gas prices go up and go down. And there's a little bit of nibbling on the edges, but they're always kind of like long-term effects. But certainly definitely not a war. It's a kinetic action. How dare you call me a steward? I'm a flight progress coordinator. Events going on overseas have caused the price of oil to spike. So the president's been asked about it, and he's weighing in. And then what is he actually going to do to help drive the prices down? And is it honest, or is it a little bit manipulated? Here's President Trump in an interview with a local affiliate, I believe in Cincinnati.
I want to ask you about something that's on everybody's mind, gas prices. Last few weeks, folks have been seeing them go up. Are you looking at a threshold for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Saw the announcement from the IEA earlier today.
Well, we'll do that, and then we'll fill it up. I filled it up once, and I'll fill it up again, but right now we'll reduce it a little bit, and that brings the prices down. We have to get rid of the evil. There's great evil taking place in Iran, as you know, and our military has been unbelievable. We are knocking the hell out of them. And we've knocked out their Navy, their Air Force, all of their anti-aircraft weaponry, their radar. Frankly, we knocked out their leaders twice. They have a new leader every 3 weeks, every 3 days. So I think we're doing really an amazing job, and we're being given credit all over the world. Somebody had to do it. 47 years of horror, 47 years of killing and maiming people, millions of people killed because of this country. So it was time for somebody to do it. We should have had a president do it a long time ago.
I don't know if he remembered what the question was, or maybe he did because he didn't really want to get into the details. It's a very manipulative answer. I don't care if that gives you a case of the feels and you really, really, really like the president of the United States. You were asked about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and you were talking about how you took out the Navy and you took out the radar and all the losers out there who should have done this a long time ago. I mean, I could go back in time and find moments when you said the exact opposite of that, but we'll get to that in a little bit. You were asked about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is the emergency quantity of oil we have in this country that the government maintains in case of an emergency, like we got to go to war, a war, not a kinetic activity, and the tanks got to roll and the planes got to fly. The oil's supposed to be for that. It's not supposed to be for the American people who are feeling the pinch. It's long-term gain after a short-time pain, right? That's the message we got, the manipulation that we got. So the president there is talking about how awesome the American military is, and it hat tip to them. They're doing awesome. They're kicking butt, I guess. I don't really follow because I believe that all the media is manipulating the events that are going on overseas. But that has nothing to do with the issue at hand, and that is, how much is it going to cost you to fill up your tank? So CBS News has this one. Because who remembers, I don't know, the last midterm election, 2022? Headline, planned release of strategic reserve would put U.S. supplies at lowest levels in 44 years. I hope CBS News doesn't lose its FCC license for reporting this. You know, it has facts and years in there and figures, but that could be inconvenient. That could be construed as fake news. But it'll be lowered because the United States is going to reduce by 172 million barrels in our Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which can hold up to like 700, but it's only around 400 right now. So we're not even close to capped. There's actually a lot more we could put aside, but we're going to drain it, what we currently have, by almost half. This is a move that's similar to what Joe Biden did in the last midterm year, 2022. He drained the Strategic Petroleum Reserve by 180 million. So 172, 180, virtually the same amounts. Now, why did Joe Biden do that? He did it right before the election. And the Republicans railed and they said, you're putting our national security at risk. You're draining our strategic reserve of oil so that you can bring the price of gas down a few cents here or there. That's treasonous. It was manipulative. Certainly caused the midterms to not be quite as catastrophic for the Democrats. What's the difference now? President's getting killed in the polls, particularly on the cost of gasoline. That's one of the things that people feel. It's visceral when you got to gas up and you're saying, what the heck? It cost me normally $30 and now it's costing me $40, costing me $50 to fill up a tank that I have to fill up to get to work, so that I can earn more money because the cost of groceries gone up so high. And nobody's even thinking about the cost of fuel impacting basically everything in our economy. Do you go to the grocery store? You know the bananas don't grow there, right? They're shipped in on a big truck that uses diesel. Everything in your life is connected to fuel and energy. We haven't even begun to feel the impacts of these higher costs. Another element of it too that's a little bit manipulative. Who remembers this whole thing with Russia and Ukraine, right? We're doing the Indiana Jones thing with the sandbag and the idol, the gold idol, where we swap out one war for another. And Donald Trump came into office saying he wasn't going to get into any wars. And on top of that, he was going to stop the war going on between Russia and Ukraine. And I don't care about that war. But part of the United States response to what Russia was doing with all these sanctions, and Russia is a giant gas station effectively for Europe right now. They have a lot of fuel. Well, the United States is going to remove sanctions on Russia in order to alleviate the prices. This comes from the New York Times, at one point a newspaper. Headline: Trump removes sanctions on Russia to help oil flow amid Iran conflict. So I guess the enemy that's greater here in this situation is the price of the pump rather than the Russian bear. But the United States on Thursday temporarily lifted sanctions on Russian oil currently at sea. In a podcast interview, our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, said, quote, "It's unfortunate that Russia stood to gain financially from the conflict in Iran, but that he hoped it would benefit from only this micro period. Short-time pain, long-term gain," right? And this says nothing about how last year, I think it was last year, we wound up doubling tariffs on India because they were buying Russian oil. And then we got problems with Europe because they don't like the definitely not a war, totally a kinetic action going on in Iran. And Europe is angry at Russia. So there's all this like foreign entanglements and intrigue stuff going on here. It's very manipulative. Nobody seems to really have the definite answer, except our founding fathers. And I say that very tongue-in-cheek because I want to go to a manipulation that came across, this was probably a week and a half ago. And this kind of hurts me. I really like Glenn Beck. He has been very good to me. I've been on his television program 2 times. I've been on his radio show a couple times. A couple years ago, when I was trying to get Tennessee legislation passed on through, he, in a moment, had me on his radio show to help pump it out there. But I'm going to call a spade because he came out a week and a half ago with one of the most manipulative things that I have ever seen. And I can't even comment on it without actually giving it a play. So this comes from Glenn Beck interviewing one of our founding fathers, George Washington, artificial intelligence. It's about a minute and a half, and then I got a couple of comments on it.
George, we are trying to not fight foreign wars and not be involved in the world's policemen. But there are times that we have to demonstrate strength in order to prevent conflict. But I don't know where the foreign entanglement begins and where it ends.
When I was president, I did not crave power. I didn't strut in my uniform, dreaming of conquest. In fact, I begged several times to not be the general and not be the president. I didn't want it, but I understood my responsibility. And I also understood that some things that are easy to forget when you're staring down bayonets. Peace is not the default. It has to be guarded deliberately with foresight and strength. My generation lived through a fragile independence. Our new republic was surrounded, literally and figuratively, by instability. Most of the founders believed that we would not survive to 1820. We thought it was an interesting experiment. European powers were sniffing the opportunities. States were threatening to splinter. Loyalists were lurking. None of this was hypothetical. It was the daily background noise of early America.
So how did you protect that freedom?
Well, you said it, through strength. Weakness didn't just invite disagreement, it invited disunion.
That was really off-putting for a multitude of reasons. It's not honest. It's very manipulative. First of all, Glenn Beck is sitting at a table by himself. That individual is not sitting there, and he's nodding along because it's supposed to be interactive, like he's actually interviewing George Washington. And let's talk about the visual representation of George Washington and how they might have created this. Allegedly, this is artificial intelligence. Maybe they had some sort of AI take his writings and historical records and try to create this dude. But I don't know at what point in his life, because people change their positions in one point or another. I mean, look, if you created an AI Donald Trump, I mean, he would be against an Iran kinetic conflict, definitely not a war. But at other times, he seems to be for it, right? So where's the consistency here? The visual, though. He's got a blue T-shirt on. If, again, you're listening, you have to come and watch us over at Rumble, YouTube, or Spotify, like 35 minutes into the program at this point. He's wearing this blue T-shirt. Looks like me. George Washington was better than me. In fact, he had this whole thing where he wrote about the rules of civility and decent behavior. And he talked a lot about wearing the right clothes. If he was actually alive, he would have shown up in a suit and tie to be taken seriously. Definitely not a wrinkled blue T-shirt to look like he's just some dude hanging out in 2026 who apparently still has the same hairstyle that he did in the 1700s. So a little bit weird. How about the comment about I didn't strut around in my uniform? George Washington wore his uniform to the Second Continental Congress to effectively tell them, when you guys split, you're going to put me in charge of the military. He wanted that position. That's pretty clear. If you haven't figured it out, I kind of like George Washington. I've kind of done a lot of reading on him. I actually did a lot of reading on him, and one of the books I read was from Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck wrote an entire book on George Washington. So for him to be ignorant of that, or at least claim to be ignorant of that in this interview, is laughable. He knows about the uniform. He knows about the rules for civility, how that would never work. In fact, the book that Glenn Beck wrote, it's called Being George Washington, which, before I move on to the next thing, I can't resist. Here's a picture of the cover. It's Glenn Beck with a bust of George Washington that's sort of fuzzy in the background. And I think it's so appropriate for this entire thing because the AI George Washington, he talks an awful lot like Glenn Beck. I listened to his radio show for a long time, and it's pretty clear to me that they took AI and said, make it talk like Glenn Beck. I mean, that would be my presupposition here. You don't believe me? I don't even know if you caught it, but there was an element to this that I think gives away the entire manipulation. And I'm going to play it. It's only a few seconds. See if you catch it here.
I understood my responsibility, and I also understood that some things that are easy to forget when you're staring down bayonets.
Some things that are easy to forget. The AI stuttered. AI doesn't stutter. One more time.
I understood my responsibility, and I also understood that some things that are easy to forget when you're staring down bayonets.
Manipulation. They took what they wanted said out of the mouth of George Washington, knowing that the viewers probably have an affinity for our founding fathers, particularly our first president, so they could make the case that the American government needs to be more aggressive in foreign policy. George Washington's farewell address kind of says it all: stay out of foreign entanglements. This is diametrically opposed to everything that he stood for at the end of his political career. It's a manipulation. It sounds like something Teddy Roosevelt would say, not George Washington, and Glenn Beck knows it. It kind of reminds me of the way communists will co-opt Christianity. And they'll say, Jesus was really a communist, don't you know? Or God wants all the guns to be gone. So there's this dirtbag, as we've been hitting the right all day. Let's go to this dirtbag from the political left who's running for Senate down in Texas. Here's a video of him. It's a couple years old, talking about gun seizure and gun control and the fallout of Uvalde, and how he likes to manipulate people of faith and what they actually believe, and how it comports with just coincidentally, serendipitously, with his political aims of taking away your right to defend yourself.
We're the only country in the world that allows this to happen. Globally, we are not an outlier in mental health. We're not an outlier in school security. We're an outlier in the number of readily accessible weapons of war in our community. You can't offer thoughts and prayers on Monday and then debate a bill to loosen gun regulations on Tuesday. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe prayer can change lives. I believe prayer can change the world. But there is something profoundly cynical about asking God to solve a problem that we're not willing to solve ourselves. God moves, God works through us. God has no other hands but our hands.
I can't take this turbo freak much more. I was going to let it play for another 30 seconds, but I think you kind of get the gist of it. God has no hands but these hands? Bro, do you even Old Testament? There was a pillar of fire and smoke leading the Israelites to the promised land. Were those these hands or something else? The Red Sea parted. Whose hands were doing that? You don't have to read very many chapters into the book, but it sounds nice and manipulative. Don't you feel bad that a shooter went into a school and the police, through cowardice, failed to actually address that threat in Uvalde? You should just surrender your ability to protect and defend yourself against an out-of-control government that's going to be run by the likes of James Tallarico from Texas. He's doing pretty well in the polls. We'll see how it goes here. If they're able to manipulate the voters one way or another, he could be actually the first Democrat senator from Texas in a long time. One more I want to get to, and I teased at the very beginning, and talk about emotional manipulation. And this is an element of the criminal justice system that really doesn't get a lot of attention, and it should. And that is in the courtroom context, and how the jury, their emotions are manipulated. That's the job of the attorneys out there, be they the prosecutor or the defense. The attorneys, their job is to manipulate the jury to their way of thinking, to manipulate the judge to be more sympathetic towards their motions and all of that. How's it going to play, though, when the perpetrator commits a felony? So this one comes from mjcattorneys.com. It's sort of a summary of this case that's out of Indiana. Indiana school employee charged with having sex with student. It's a female employee, guys. So the police arrested this woman. Her name is Alicia Hughes after a 17-year-old boy reported having sexual intercourse with her on 5 separate occasions, and actually came to law enforcement's attention because she got caught with another kid from school who was 18, but he's of age. So she stepped down on her husband with an 18-year-old. Apparently her job was she did like the records and the attendance. So this 18-year-old called in and said, I'm not coming to school today. And then she just started meeting with him and having sex with him. So she's a groomer. She's a pedophile, pederast, however you want to characterize it. And she got busted by her husband. Her husband got abusive towards her, not defending him. He's going to have to face justice on that court. But she called the police because he tuned her up. So police got out there, figure out what happens. They wind up interviewing this woman, Alicia Hughes, and she confesses on camera. And then the police, who got away from their prime directive, if you ask me, the prime directive being the process, instead of just handing over the evidence, they saw fit to release the video of her quasi-confessing to this crime, to tape the jury pool, to get people's emotions going. And she's crying and she's trying to manipulate the detective's emotions. And the police are now trying to manipulate the public's emotions, saying, like, can you believe this woman? She's done this to multiple students. And now there's going to be an issue of, can they actually bring her to trial? She's facing like 5 years per count and $10,000 per count. So it could be a pretty long, lengthy prison stint if she does actually get convicted and sentenced. But the prosecutors are wondering if they're going to actually be able to bring a trial. because the jury pool is so tainted. I mean, I presume that they could take it to an outside jurisdiction, but videos circulate everywhere. It's going to make the job of the government bringing forward a judicious and lawful, processed, focused prosecution very difficult, because instead of focusing on the process, they focused on the outcome, and they tried to manipulate the jury. And you might not put this dirtbag in prison. All right, we've reached the end of the AMRAD pod, and just before I get to our palate cleanse today, which is a doozy, it's all about staying quiet when your wife asks you a trap question, tries to manipulate you. I do have one administrative note. It's spring break. We got, I don't know, 1 million people here in Daytona Beach, and they're all getting into fights and shootings, and it's getting wild down here. But also the kiddos are out of school, so I'm going to do my best to try to, on the sly, trying to come and do the AMRAD pod all week long, but the episodes might be a little shorter than normal. It might be a little bit more of a smorgasbord of topics. And then also, as a personal request, my little guy, he's going to do some professional wrestling fantasy camp this week. He has to learn all the moves and how to talk on the microphone and smack talk, and even come up with his own character name. So if you have any fun suggestions for an 8-year-old who is a son of this guy, put it in the comments on Rumble and YouTube. What should be his stage name? And I'll make the suggestions and see if the 3rd grader likes any of them, guys. So today's palate cleanse, without any further delay, let's give this one a play.
Babe, I was at Home Depot, and there was a woman there that looked just like you.
Oh, was she pretty?
Yes.
She was? Tell me, how pretty was she?
No.
How pretty was she, Michael?
No.
So you're saying I'm not pretty?
She wasn't pretty.
She wasn't pretty, but she looks just like me.
There was no one there. There's no person. I've been home all day.
What was her name, Michael?
Stephen.
But I didn't see anybody ever. I only have eyes for you.
Those dastardly wives, particularly when they're cleaning the kitchen knives, they always try to trap you and manipulate you. All right, guys, be back with you tomorrow, noontime. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AMRADPod.